Okay, so here we go. This is the top 4 of MTG DeaLS day before Mother's Day legacy event. We've got Jason Bulkowski playing Blouses, which is the Bant enchantment deck.
And we've got Joe playing a Maverick deck. This looks very similar to one that got top 16 in the Star City event last week. This is featuring Fauna Shaman, but without the Loyal Retainer's build.
And yeah, so I'm sitting here with the Maverick expert, Jacob Corey, here, so he can probably give us some good insight into how the deck works as the match goes on. And I'm Joe Lissette, and here we are. You saw that right? You saw that right? The paper?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're still shuffling up here. Jason playing the Blouses deck on the right, he defeated a Maverick deck in the top 8, so he's got at least a little experience recently against this type of opponent.
And Joe just beat the mirror match he actually played against me, and he managed to get better draws. So he's advancing and playing another blue, green, white deck, otherwise known as Blouses.
So I heard you saying earlier you don't have Maze of Ith main deck, and correct? Yeah. And he does, and that should probably help him. I mean, it's not going to matter on the hexproof guys, but the angel token from the Geist of Saint Traff can be turned back by the.
Right, the Maze of Ith is going to really help slow down Jason's clock, and really Joe's going to be utilizing his life total as a buffer and try to develop the board, try to clog that down for Jason.
Now, one thing that Joe might be a little unprepared for is how, even though this is a creature mirror, Mother of Runes isn't going to be as relevant as you would sometimes think, because there isn't much removal in Jason's deck. He's not even playing swords, and that might come as Joe might expect him to have that in there.
Right. I think this is the list from Sacramento that essentially used hexproof guys and creature pumps to just hit the opponent really, really hard and fast without giving him a chance to recover.
Yeah, it's got extra counters instead of potentially swords. It is that same list. There's a few changes in the board, but other than that, it's identical.
Yeah, Jason's been playing a lot on the Star City circuit.
Yeah, he's had some success there both last year and this year. Joe, I know, is an old Type 1 player from way back. I don't know how much he plays anymore at this point in his life, but so it looks like they're pulling up their opening hands here.
Let's take a look what they got in their hands.
That's not good. So it looks like Jason's got a couple land, a bird, unstable mutation, brainstorm. So that's pretty good. Even if we can't tell the other cards, that seems pretty solid.
Looks like he has a daze as well.
Yeah. I don't see, I mean, the 3-drop creatures are pretty important for him, and he doesn't have any, but I imagine he'll keep that anyway.
Joe's got a couple lands, which is a good start. He's got Green Sun Zenith to accelerate. It looks like 2 Pride Mage.
Well, those will actually do some good against the enchantments.
Could be a Knight as well.
Yeah,
which
maybe
is
so.
Pretty important for Joe. Joe's going to try to really get that Knight out there before Jason can get something set up.
Jason must have not had a bird in his hand because he played Reinforced and passed. Although I wouldn't tell it past him completely to have forgotten that in the middle of the turn, but so Zenith, turn 1 Zenith for 0 is obviously fetching Dryad Arbor. If you're Jason here, do you bother countering this, or you just let this go? Let's say you have a Spell Pierce in your hand. Do you counter that?
I think countering with a Spell Pierce is actually a really good play here.
Just because there's not that many targets in the Maverick deck for Spell Pierce?
Right, and also this has the potential of getting a Knight out on turn 2.
Right. Oh, and it resolves, so
maybe Jason doesn't have a Spell Pierce,
yeah,
or he's waiting for some other setup spell.
Yeah.
I haven't played against this matchup myself, but it seems like that getting GT active for Joe would be really useful here in this matchup.
Although, let's see, that might be tough to pull off. There are 4 main deck Prime Mages in Jason's deck, so he will have some defense against that. And again, Joe may not know what all the cards that might potentially be coming out of Jason's deck.
How vulnerable is Jason's deck to Wasteland, it seems?
There are, let's see, there's a few basics in there. Obviously, the way he's playing this game, he's not vulnerable to it at all. He's got 2 islands and 2 forests, no plains.
Oh, that looks like he should be very well off against Joe's Wastelands.
Yeah, although so Jason is obviously gonna, well, presumably gonna brainstorm and then shuffle on this turn too, but no acceleration is not gonna, doesn't put him, because he had no acceleration and we didn't see any 3-drops in his opening hand, so that puts him kind of in a no man's land.
Mm-hmm.
But
it looks like Brainstorm is really playing a role player in his deck.
Yeah, it's I mean, he's obviously depending on it right now to give him something to do. And there's a Thalia, I believe, and Jason's going to respond to that, presumably with the Brainstorm, so he can, because if he doesn't respond, then he wouldn't be able to get his shuffle in after the.
So it looks like he did finally hit that bird.
Well, he doesn't. That's not exactly what he's looking for at this point, but yeah, you're right, that was a bird. 2 unstables, a wasteland, a bird, a daze, a tundra maybe.
So it looks like he's putting back some really dead cards.
Looks like he put
right
back
now.
both unstable mutations, which seems very reasonable.
It seems like this kind of deck from Jason would really stand to gain a lot from Grinson's if just to find out some threats.
Well, his big threats are the hexproof guys, and Troll Ascetic isn't, it's not too much of a beating without an enchantment, and that's his only big guy to search out, because he can't obviously search out the blue-white Geist. But we'll see what he's got here. He really needs to have a 3-drop that's going to be a big threat.
Looks like Jason is shaking his head. He's not really happy to see what he drew.
Well, yeah. Nor does he have. Did he mistakenly set himself up to not have white mana here? Although I'm not sure he needs it anyway, but
yeah, it looks like
he doesn't have access to white.
Looks like he drew the Noble Hierarch there, which is slightly better than the unstable mutation that was gliding his hand.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to see both men, no, just one guy. Another Brainstorm. As much as Jason wants to have a 3-drop hexproof guy, I wonder if he wouldn't have been better off after that Brainstorm in the fetch land and then brainstorming again before the Thalia came into play. Wouldn't generally recommend that, but he really
just to try to find that
just to try to find a hexproof guy for his 3rd turn instead of just playing a bird.
It looks like in Joe's deck, the Linvala might actually do really well here.
Is it main deck?
It's main deck, yeah.
Oh.
Both has a blocker and a way to shut down all the mana acceleration creatures that Jason is running.
So what kind of targets does he have for his Fauna Shaman in the main deck?
It looks like a pretty standard build for Maverick. You got Knights, Mother of Ruins, Noble Hierarchs, Kasali Pride Mage. He's playing 3 Scavenging Ooze.
That's more than you normally see, isn't it?
I think the trend in Maverick is starting to see 3 because it is such an important creature. And he's also got Scrib Ranger to do some tricks in combat, as well as Mother of Ruins, Gadok Teague and Thalia against insurance against combo decks. Those seem to really help out the Maverick deck right now in the metagame.
So we just had a Knight of the Reliquary from Joe get double dazed from Jason. The Wasteland paid for the first daze, and then he played a second one. So now he's put himself way back on mana, but the bird does help make up for that. Joe still has several cards in his hand. Can't tell what they are at the moment.
I think the Thalia is really setting
Yeah.
Jason back by not giving him the tempo to counter all of Joe's threats effectively.
That may be so, but I think on top of that, not having any threatening cards whatsoever is
when Birds is starting to get into combat with Exalted, it's not looking good for Jason.
And life totals are both still pretty high, so it's he hasn't lost this game yet, but he does need to find something very soon.
This is about the turn that Jason would be looking to start bashing for a lot of heavy damage with the hexproof guys and the enchantments.
So now that he has the bird and the hierarch, with his land drop, he'll have 5 mana next turn, so he'll be able to brainstorm even with Thalia out there, and then still play a 3-drop if he can find one. But if he doesn't, this game's going to get away from him, and that can't hear exactly what's going on, but there might be some heckling going on over there. To Jason's.
Is Jason's deck really prone to these kind of draws where you're just not able to capitalize on all the cantrips and essentially get a quick opening out there?
Oh well, I haven't played around with it too much, but since I mean you know you're banking on. Ideally, what you want to do is play a 1-drop mana accelerator, and then play on turn 2 play a 3-drop hexproof creature, and he kept a hand with no accelerators and no hexproof creatures. So you have to question what he was thinking was going to happen here. I'm sure. I mean, he had to have expected to draw one by his third turn, and he didn't.
I know when you're playing like a 4 of. You have roughly 33% chance of actually seeing one out of your playset in your opening hand.
Okay.
That number jumps up to 40% if you start mulliganing aggressively for it.
Uh-huh. Well,
so
but he's actually more or less got 8 because the
right.
And
so I imagine that ups the number probably closer to 50% of his hands. He'll see some sort of action as well as some sort of acceleration.
So this was just. Just taking a glance at it, I would say this deck probably mulligans fairly decently. It's got 8 of its 1-drops and 8 of its 3-drops, so there's going to be some consistency there, and then Brainstorm to straighten things out. Although, obviously, in this case, it just didn't work.
I wonder if Wasteland in Jason's deck is really needed.
There's only 2 in there. It's probably only in there to hit. It's in there to hit specialty lands, not to mana screw the opponent.
It seems like even Maze of It wouldn't be that effective against the deck, considering all the hexproof.
No, it's certainly not as scary as it would be for a normal aggro deck. Maze of Ith would probably be better against Joe's deck than it is against Jason's deck.
It looks like Joe just drew a Swords to Plowshare here. He's probably going to wait for a good time to use it.
And he's got a pile of exalted creatures now. Jason has a Pride Mage, but that's not overly effective at this point, and the Thalia is just going to keep crashing in now for looks like 5 damage.
That first strike really shows its mettle in combat.
And a Scavenging Ooze. This looks like a blowout.
Just glutting the board, not giving Jason a chance to recover. This is one of the hallmarks of Maverick, I think, that it's able to really glue up the battlefield, not allowing other aggro decks to attack.
So since he played the Ooze, would you expect on the next turn that he will not take advantage of Exalted and just send all the creatures in?
It looks like he has critical mass. He can also use Maverick Runes to connect for 5. It looks like all of Jason's creatures are green right now.
The reason, I would just mention is because if he's not planning on sending all his creatures in, then playing the Ooze right there doesn't seem to have done him a lot of good.
I think the Ooze will eat the Knight from Joe's graveyard, become a 3/3, and now having just enough to get to lethal.
Yeah.
Now here, the Geist is going to prevent Joe from being able to make that line of play.
So, but at this point, there's a decent chance that Joe knows what's in Jason's stack. On an off chance he doesn't, do you not play the Geist there and just scoop the game up so that he doesn't know exactly what he's hitting into for the sideboard games? Or do you still hold out hope that you can win this game and really try and show everything in order to try and do it?
I think Jason is really trying to play his outs.
I agree that he's trying to. I'm just asking if you think that he should be. Because at some point you get so far behind that you're not catching up. And I feel like we're maybe at that point already.
Yeah, I think the Blouses or kind of Pants deck is got a lot of attention just because it was so unusual to see that kind of deck and really a creature featuring creature enchantments be able to win a Star City event. And so I think there's been a lot of chatter about, wow, how did this deck win? Is this the real deal, or is this more a hallmark of the player playing it? I feel like in Legacy there's a lot more being rewarded for an unusual deck choice than just playing powerful cards.
Right. Yeah, certainly, you look at this deck list, Unstable Mutation, Spectral Flight, these are not cards you commonly see. And even Troll Aesthetic, 6 or 8 years ago it might have been a powerhouse creature, but now it's, you don't see it very often.
I think that's one of the reasons why Tom Martell was really able to capitalize that at the Grand Prix in Indianapolis. utilizing Lingering Souls in Legacy, which is really an unusual application for the card, and it actually hit a really good spot in the metagame.
Right. And then
by locking out a lot of the Maverick decks, and then the blue suite was able to control the combo decks as well.
Right. Yeah. Although, with the card pool the size of Legacies and the rate the tournaments fire off now, you saw the rug decks react immediately and start playing Sulfur Elementals and then set that back, which also has a side effect against the Maverick deck, which doesn't want to see Sulfur Elemental against either.
Yeah. One of the ways Maverick tries to attack the rug deck is with Thalia, just because a large portion of the rug deck is based on spells, and when they tap out 3 mana, 3 mana for the rug deck is a lot, but for the Sulfur Elemental it's a really good investment.
So now we see the Pride Mage coming in instead of the Thalia. I imagine that's because at this point the first strike doesn't matter because the exalted creatures are so large that nothing's gonna threaten them anyway.
That's right. It's about a 6/6 at this point.
Yeah, and so the first strike is more valuable on defense because it can kill the Geist without trading.
So it looks like we have a 5/5 Geist coming in with an Angel token as well. Looks like the players in the room are starting to get excited. Finally, Jason's able to attack.
But this is probably 3 turns later than he would generally want to be in this position.
Do you think Joe still has a good position in this game against Jason's?
I do, because with the only one creature needs to get in with the Exalted, and now all of Jason's untapped potential blockers are green. The Geist representing a non-green creature to block with last turn.
This might just be an all-out attack. Just try to get some leverage in the game.
Right. I wonder, could Joe have just won the game last turn by giving his Ooze protection from green and sending it in? The Geist would have had to block, and that wouldn't have left Jason with too many options.
It looks like now Joe lost all of 2 of his exalted creatures, so his clock is slightly smaller than it was last turn.
And that traded for the Geist, and Jason has no follow-up. So, other than all the news, will now just get much larger and still represent a lethal threat.
So it looks like Joe's deck has a good bit of synergy there with being able to run speed bumps essentially in combat, especially with the Ooze. Ooze is a great creature in Legacy.
Yeah, it's a fantastic card. It's really one of. I think when the Commander set initially was printed, like it was along with Flusterstorm and maybe the Chaos Warp, which didn't end up being very relevant. But the Ooze has shown that it looks like it has staying power, and it's going to be relevant for years to come.
Yeah, it's fundamentally changed a lot of decks in Legacy. We have the Dredge decks now. More worried about it. We have all of the Snapcaster decks, which were we didn't actually see Scavengers being utilized as heavily before Snapcaster became printed.
So did we just see a double block there from Jason, and then both of these creatures died and the attacker did not die?
Yeah, he attacked with the Thalia.
And it appeared that it was double blocked. So if that was Jason indicating that perhaps the Thalia ought to be dead, and it turns out that
it is a 4/4.
It appeared that Jason just miscounted there, or
yeah, we have a Noble Hierarch and a Solid Pride Mage still on the battlefield at that point.
So there's either a mistake or just he realized it didn't matter and he thought he would throw 2 guys in front of it for fun. But anyway, so we've been talking a lot about the Legacy environment and other tournaments, but now let's try and focus on this match some more. So we're going to sideboarding here. What does it look like Joe's going to be doing here?
Well, we can see Joe looking at the chokes in his sideboard. I don't think that's a very effective use of some of the sideboard slots. He is definitely pulling out the Spell Pierce, which is really, really good at countering Jason's tempo generating cards like the counters and some of the creature enchantments, which really is the cards that Joe wants to be worrying about in this matchup.
So it looked like he pulled out the Spell Pierces, the Chokes, and the Canonists now. I wonder if he's going to sideboard back some of those back out, and he's just representing that he's boarding 7 cards, or if he's actually going to leave them all in.
I think he's really going to be pulling them out. Some of the weaker cards, it looks like he did take out the Choke there.
Yeah, his Canonist does not. Yeah, okay. So he is just He's just representing that he's boarding 7 cards. He's actually not.
Yeah, that's a very good tactic by Joe. In a lot of these matchups, you're not really going to have very many cards that are really going to change the dynamic of the matchup. And we also did see him pull out a Mother of Runes, which I think Joe is realizing that they're not that useful in this matchup.
Whereas Jason looked like he was taking out some enchantments, and I know that's what he generally does. He's got a pair of Umezawa's Chitties, which very likely might come in. He has Submerges, which are shut down by Gaddock Teague, but you have to take that risk and bring them in anyway. Is that right?
Right. I think Gaddock Teague, Submerge is just so huge in this matchup. And against Maverick, Maverick really has a very difficult time coming back from a tempo loss by any shuffle effect essentially counters that creature with Submerge.
Right. And then he has a pair of Path to Exiles also. I don't know if those might come in, and they're certainly... Well, let's take a look and see what we would board out if we were Jason here. So if we figure we want to bring in the Jitties and the Submerges, that's already 5. Can we find room for 7?
I think we can... We're good cutting possibly 1 Force Will and 1 Spell Pierce here.
That seems reasonable.
And
then
Spell Pierce is really only going to counter possible Choke and a possible Green Sun Zenith. Everything else is just a setup, because the most important creatures in this matchup are the Hexproof guys.
And if he's bringing in the Umezawa's Chitties, he might have been taking out Unsealed Mutations, because that gives him more of the same thing, and the Jitty is probably just a stronger card in this matchup.
Very Macabre, I don't think, is very relevant.
No, that doesn't. I mean, you can... What's the best it can do is probably to counter a Scavenging Ooze activation, and that's not much use of a card from your sideboard. We actually saw last round, we saw the mono red deck board in some Fairy Macabres and draw 2 of them opening hand against an Agrolum deck and find no use for them. And whereas if they were the burn spells that got boarded out instead, she might have been able to win. So yeah, I wouldn't imagine that Fairy Macabres are going to, and they're even less useful here than they would be in that match.
Looks like we're taking a little break here. So getting back to the Legacy metagame, how do you think it's going to develop in the next coming months, now that we have Avacyn restored?
Well, I think we'll start to see a lot of experimenting, primarily in the Rogue decks, but then in other decks also on how viable the Miracles are. I think the Thunderous Wrath will be the primary one in that deck. I'm sure that Temporal Mastery will get used here and there, but I don't expect that to really pick up. I mean, yes, it's blue, so it can be pitched to Force of Will if it's not going to help you, but or if it does pick up, I think you're just going to see people having to accept that they're going to mulligan more often, and maybe that's okay.
One card that I really want to see, and I think has a lot of potential in the Legacy metagame, is Terminus, as a much cheaper Wrath effect, which really bypasses a lot of the strengths of Legacy, which is the graveyard.
That's true, yeah, it does. It puts the creatures on the bottom of the deck, so...
It looks like we have a hand here from Joe that just is completely unacceptable. A single land, which taps for colorless, has no business in an opening hand for Maverick deck.
And Jason has kept his hand. I saw, I think, a 3-drop in there and some land, and that's already better than what he had in the first game. I know he's trying to show us his hand. That's
there
nice
we go.
So
looks like he has a very good potential turn 4 attack with a GT, and that if Joe can't answer that GT, that's really going to set him back multiple turns.
Yeah.
I think both decks really take advantage of the acceleration afforded by cards like Green Sun Zenith and Noble Hierarch to set up much larger plays than Legacy has been used to in the last few years.
Yeah, and that's one place where Joe's deck will have an advantage here, because his accelerators are Noble Hierarchs, and Green Sun Zenith, where Jason's are Noble Hierarchs and Birds. And after the first turn, Green Sun Zenith is still a very valuable card, whereas Birds of Paradise becomes increasingly useless as the turns go by.
So it looks like Joe here has 3 lands, removal, acceleration, and Mother of Runes, which is a pretty good opener.
I mean,
it doesn't offer a lot of gas.
Yeah,
and it looks like he's wondering what he's going to do here.
I mean, he kept that hand. He virtually has to, but he doesn't have much going on that Jason's going to care about.
So it looks like he starts here with Mother of Runes because he does not have very many turn 2 plays. Looks like he drew a Fauna Shaman, which will allow him to make much more lines of play in the coming turns, assuming it's going to survive.
And combined with the Mother Runes will be able to allow the Fauna Shaman to block the Geist, and survive. And the Geist would die, and if the Jitty was on the Geist, it would not gain counters. That's correct, isn't it? So I would say that despite the mulligan, Joe seems to be in very strong shape this game also.
Looks like he drew an Avalanche here. Now the problem with the Maverick deck is that you can't really control the quality of your top decks, and so by design the deck has to just completely overload with threats.
Right. Now Jason's deck, yeah, he might be. And we think he worried out the Unsealed Mutation, and we're going to see a point where he would probably be better off with that, or the Spectral Flight, than the Jitty that he does have.
I think Spectral Flight is a much, much more powerful tool in this matchup.
Yes, I agree. There's
it's even seen played in some standard decks, which is very interesting to see that Legacy in a lot of ways mirrors the current trends in standard.
Oh no, that's pretty significant. Hard because Jason wouldn't want to bounce a land at this point to stay on curve, but he is able to hardcast the Daze to counter the Fauna Shaman.
Yeah.
That actually, he does have Spectral Flight to say, okay, I retract
that's
my
good.
earlier comment. Jason now appears to be in very strong shape.
Yeah, it looks like this is going to be a very quick game coming up. Joe can't really interact with the Geist aside from blocking, and Spectral Flight is going to eliminate any option of that.
Now, Joe has a Wasteland in his hand, and there is a Savannah on Jason's side of the board, but no, it looks like Joe's going to... Oh, he's just going to draw off the Horizon Canopy. Now, that's certainly...
Never land for Joe.
That's certainly not a position play he wants to be making on, turn 3, is just cantripping out land. But he doesn't appear to have much else to do, so can't fault him for that. But yeah, now we're going to see that... the lack of a 2-power creature, even if Jason didn't have any way to boost the Geist... which he does, but even if he didn't,
Now, if you were Jason here, would you play the GTA without having an opportunity to equip? It seems like you wouldn't want to expose the GTA to a potential Pride Mage.
Well, I think if there is a Pride Mage, it's going to have to hit the Spectral Flight anyway. So I think maybe I would put down the JD. Plus, putting the JD down prevents Joe being able to play his own, which... wouldn't do well.
Yeah, it doesn't look like Joe is in a position here to play and equip the GTA profitably.
No, it does not. And even if he could, it's only going to gain him life since the counter, he can't kill the Geist anyway. This game turned around very quickly. Joe, as opposed to the first game where Jason didn't have anything to do beyond mana producers, this game, Joe doesn't have anything to do that's relevant to stopping Jason's deck.
It's turns like these that Maverick would want to consider running Brainstorm and start getting rid of a lot of those dead cards away.
Is that a Thalia that just hit the board there? And that's not going to do a whole lot of good. Now if the GD comes down, so like you were suggesting, he did not play the GD last turn, although he doesn't play it this turn either, which I might have expected him to... I'm sorry, the Thalia would prevent the... prevent the Jitty from equipping anyway, but so...
He would need an additional mana.
Right, so the sword takes out the token, which is just a free... it buys Joe some life, but it's a free card advantage for Jason. But I would expect the Jitty to come down now, unless he has something else. We saw he has a forest, a bird, a Jitty, and he passes the turn. I don't know if he has another blue card in his hand or not. I think
he's just, at this point, bluffing. He realizes that there's not much in the way that Joe can develop his board to regain an advantage. Right. We got the life totals 23 to...
It looks like 7. But Joe has drawn Linvala, which is obviously has flying, and with Mother of Runes can block. Although he'll still take 4 and not kill anything.
Does Jason have another blue card to counter?
He presumably not. Otherwise, I would.
Looks like
he does. He does have the Geist of St. Trapped. You're right. So.
At this point, I would.
There it is. Okay, yeah. It appeared that time had passed, but yeah.
Tempo.
Yeah. Well, he sets himself up now to be able to just win on this turn. Yeah. Then that's it.
The player scooping up.
Like, I can understand holding back the force because you're trying to protect the Spectral Flight, but at that point in the game, if Joe has any way to kill the Spectral Flight, he's running it out there, and and he just didn't. So we're going to game 3 with the Maverick deck on the play, and obviously that's significant.
Yeah, I think Jason's deck I think Jason's deck is the aggro in this matchup, and being on the draw by giving the Maverick deck a chance to really develop a gummy board will give a lot of difficulty for Jason's deck, even though it's more powerful.
So now that Jason's going second, do you think he should consider taking out a couple of his dazes?
I think in traditional tempo-oriented decks, that's an appropriate play. However, in Jason's deck, by design, it's really looking at utilizing a quick acceleration off Noble Hierarch and Birds of Paradise, and then setting up days to essentially recoup the
right. So you
tempo lost.
You leave in days. You just hope to not play it until you have a 3-drop on the board.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the more powerful lines of play is to play as though you don't have it until you and let the opponent really walk into it.
Mm-hmm. So we didn't see any sideboard cards have too much of an impact in that game.
No, I imagine that Jason brought in some Submerge.
Yeah, and
they wouldn't have really mattered. They would have
right.
maybe saved the use of a Forcer Wall.
And he had obviously he had the Jitty in his hand, which did not end up coming down. He won without it. So we'll see if the sideboard cards. Although we may be looking at just 3 cards have come in for each player potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that would, that would explain why we didn't see any of them.
So Joe's opening up a hand here with again a couple lands, acceleration.
Does he have green?
Does he have Knight and
Oh,
Thalia.
Savannah. So that looks these are a couple hierarchs.
Looks like he's in a really good spot to set up with that hand. What about from Jason? We see.
Oh, Jason does finally have a 1-drop accelerator. It looks like. And I think I saw Submerge there also. I didn't see a 3-drop. Yeah, but if he has one, then he's in pretty good shape.
I'm not normally a fan of using Submerge on mana accelerators. I think Jason really can't afford to spend those removal spells on cheap acceleration. He should instead focus on getting rid of large attackers or problematic creatures like Solid Pride Mage.
That would have been a trap there. If he would have fished up a tropical island and then played his Hierarch and Submerged, then he very well might be get wasted back and set himself actually farther back than he would have wanted. Now Thalia comes down pretty early this game, so that's going to make the Submerge cost more.
I think you're right. Jason is playing against getting blown out by Wasteland.
Because he knows he has to get to 3 mana as soon as he can, so he's able to do it, assuming he has a land in his hand on turn 2 this game, and he does have a fetched land.
I think the play here, he doesn't have any really
doesn't have a
aggressive
3-drop, does he? No.
But he does have 2 dazes. It looks like he might want to just set up a play with Submerge and Daze as a backup.
So they're not going to do as much good as you would hope, since that Thalia is going to mess things up. Okay.
So Jason's really playing his opponent into a bluff here.
So he's sending the Hierarch in, preventing him losing the ability to play a Daze or a Submerge this turn because of the Thalia.
I think Jason's just really trying to utilize every chance he can get that extra damage.
Yeah.
Without having spot removal, even in the form of swords, Jason really has to develop any sort of threat while he can.
And plus, there's not any big threatening card. I mean, Thalia is disruptive, but there's no big threatening card on the board that he has to worry about right now. So it is probably correct to get in for the 2 damage, even though it seems shaky to throw away your ability to counter anything.
Looks like Joe's considering playing his Knight of a Reliquary here, signaling to the camera that he is indeed using those exalted triggers.
So there's that Knight. It looks like an empty graveyard, so the Knight's only a 2/2 right now. Although that canopy will be able to jump into the graveyard whenever Joe feels like it. So Jason has a Submerge, a Spectral Flight, a Force, and 2 Dazes. I would think we would see
It almost seems worth it to just attempt to erase. He can deal 6 damage with Spectral Flight against Joe's landlocked board.
I agree. So he pays 1 to submerge the knight. Yeah, and then I would like to see the Spectral Flight come down on the Pride Mage, but it doesn't.
That would commit all of Jason's mana for return and next turn.
That's true.
Just to get 2 damage in.
So he gets in for 4 with the Pride Mage, dropping Joe to 14. Jason's down to 15, but his life total is not as relevant, I don't think. If the game starts to get away from him, whether he's at 3 or 12 won't really make much difference.
Yeah, both these Bant color decks really have to just connect on the battlefield. In combat, they don't have the reach like the reg decks with the burn.
Mm-hmm. So Joe's drawn off of his Horizon Canopy, it looks like, making his... when the knight comes back down, it'll be 3-3. And there it is. And Jason could force a will this.
I think that's an appropriate play here. Getting rid of that daze.
Yeah, he doesn't need the daze, that's for sure.
And again, Joe cracks in for 4 damage.
Yeah, so they're both trading swings for 4 here. There we go, 10. So 3 more hits will finish Jason off, whether he breaks that fetch land or not. He chooses not to. Draws another land. So at this turn, I think the Spectral Flight has to come down, and it doesn't. And what do you think about that?
I think that Jason might be trying to just play the damage race here. Just wait until the last possible moment to cast the Spectral Flight.
And use it just as a surprise, but...
just as a when Joe is expecting to put up blockers.
Oh, now that Maze of Ith is really going to put a kink in the plans for Jason. This is where he really needs his hexproof creatures. Because that's... he's not getting through that Maze of Ith with a Pride Mage. If indeed
that's a big top deck for Joe.
Zenith for 3.
I imagine it's going to get a Knight of Irulcore here. This is a really great play by Joe. He's attempting to coax Jason into attempting to counter it, thinking that he has the game locked up with the Spectral Flight, but that Maze of Ith is really going to come as a surprise.
Jason breaking a fetch land now. If he was going to break the fetch land, I think if he either was going to break it last turn or else still not break it this turn, but nothing has really changed in regard to he still doesn't have a Brainstorm. And I don't know that he's going to manage to use... Yeah, so that he broke that fetch land. It did not appear to do anything.
Yeah, as a deck thinning tool, fetch lands are ill-advised.
Right, because it doesn't. But if that is what he was using it for, he should have done it last turn.
That's right. We saw him shake his head after he drew that tropical island, saying this is not what he wanted to see.
And then the maze comes down, so he needs some help right now, and that's not gonna do it. So he's not gonna die this turn, but this game has certainly gotten away from him.
This is a scenario where I would actually be very happy to see a Path to Exile in Jason's deck.
Now, actually, the Pride Mage can still attack here, I think, because the Knight's only a 3/3. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the Pride Mage can still attack, and Jason won't have to worry about dying because his Hierarch can still block. I
think Joe would still elect to use the Maze of Ith.
Right, of course he would. And if not that, he'd block with the Hierarch. He's not going to want any more damage to get through. Now, if you're Jason, do you give Joe the option of mazing your guy, or you just not attack? Like, if Jason knew that Joe wouldn't use the maze for whatever reason, does he still
Nah, it looks like by body
Yeah,
language that
yeah, well, that's-
he doesn't even care about that attacker.
Yeah, no, well, yeah, Joe obviously chooses to use the maze. But now Jason can block whatever comes down, but...
and a big top deck. Two top decks in a row for Joe. He got the Swords to Plowshares here.
That's a Pride Mage.
That's just as good.
Yeah, this is all but over.
It looks like Joe really gummed down the board, and Jason just didn't manage to draw what he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, he needed to find a 3-drop again, and he wasn't able to. I'm not sure there's even a card Jason can draw here to take this game down. Or maybe a Brainstorm into a Wasteland plus a blocker. I suppose that might do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is yet another land.
Yeah.
Although, even though it seems like Jason is flooded, Joe looks like he has more land out than Jason does.
Yeah, the quality of the Maverick deck's creatures are just really show their strength. What do you feel about Sensei's Divining Top in Legacy right now as a way to mitigate these land floods? It seems like a lot more games are decided by how many non-relevant draws a deck gets rather than the strength of their cards.
That may be true. I'm not a big fan of the top in decks that aren't taking advantage of knowing what the top card of their deck is. If it's just like in occasional junk decks, you'll see a top in there just to improve the card selection when you randomly draw it. I don't like that. But I do like if you're using it with counterbalance, obviously that's powerful. And
or
now
even
with
some combo decks with Doomsday.
Right, sure, as a cantrip, and also with miracles in the deck now, being able to miracle on your opponent's turn by drawing off Sensei's Divining Top, that's certainly strong. So as long as you're using the top for something beyond the card itself, I'm in favor of it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, what did we miss on the action here? I think we missed the Pride Mage chump blocking the other Pride Mage, it looks like. So Jason's really up against the wall here. He has nothing in his hand. Joe didn't even have to use the Pride Mage to kill the Spectral Flight. I don't think it just was able to 2-for-1, or actually 2-for-0 just by attacking. And there's the Path to Exile that Jason needed 4 or 5 turns ago. Although since the Maze of it still would have set him back, it really wouldn't have mattered too much. And this looks like, here comes the whole team, and there's a Path in the Night, and Jason is still gonna die. And Joe points out
And congratulations to Joe on making it to the finals.